Speaker.
The Right Honourable David Carter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And for those who are just tuning in after the dinner break, National will oppose the taxation annual rates for 2019-20 GST Offshore Supplier Registration and Remedial Matters Bill. Mr Speaker, I've been here a while, and this bill typifies the greedy attitude that this government has to tax. I want the next Labor member who takes a call to tell me whenever before we've had the tax bill setting the rates for 1920 going to a select committee while it's still working on the tax bill for 2018-19. That's how keen this government is to keep taking taxes off the poor New Zealanders so that they can spread them around like confetti. Dr. David Clark is laughing at this, but he probably didn't have the chance to watch the TV1 News tonight, where again the Honourable Shane Jones has been caught giving millions of dollars to his nefs in Gisborne against Treasury advice, and it's mum and dad taxpayers who are paying their legitimate taxes so this government can spray it around thinking it's about buying votes. And I've got a message for the Honourable David Clark and for the Honourable Shane Jones. If they think New Zealand taxpayers are going to be fooled by the largesse of the Provincial Growth Fund as money is thrown around, then I think they've got another thing coming. So the Select Committee will continue to work on the Tax Bill 2018-19, and it will then start work on the Tax Bill 2019-2020. I was very intrigued with the contribution from the Green member, Gareth Hughes, when he said it's time for a bit of honesty about the tax debate. And the very next speaker is Dr. Duncan Webb, who says this is not about any new taxes at all. Well, it is about a new tax. It's about an Amazon tax. It's about a tax on GST for online purchases, and I support that bit of the bill because it's the work that National did prior to the general election. It is totally unfair on the retailers of New Zealand having to put GST onto their products and then somebody else being able to go on the net and import it from the likes of Amazon or eBay and dodging the GST component, putting the New Zealand retailer at a huge disadvantage. So I congratulate the government for that part of the legislation, but I will be interested in the Select Committee process to hear how it's going to be complied with. Because I think the concept of a threshold, $60,000 turnover, means that these overseas companies must then register for GST purposes. Let's see the compliance. And I think that will be a challenge for the work around the Select Committee. The next thing that Dr. Duncan Webb got wrong was around ring-fencing rental property losses. And he tries to justify that by saying it's about fairness to the tax system. Why are we ring-fencing losses on rental properties for mum and dad apartment investors, mum and dad home investors, when at the same time the legislation before the Select Committee allows this to be opened up for wealthy horse breeders? Give me an explanation, Dr. Duncan Webb, or in fact the next Labor Speaker, who might be, I think she's also a doctor, Dr. Deborah Russell. Tell me why we close it down for property owners and open up in the other legislation for wealthy racehorse breeders. No logic at all, apart from the fact some promises were made during the last election campaign by the Right Honourable Winston Peters to his mates in the racing industry, and that needs to be fulfilled. The final point I want to make is again a comment from Gareth Hughes when he said it was time to be honest about this legislation, and then went on to argue that National had proposed cutting taxes for the wealthy. That is not right. It is completely wrong. In fact, it's dishonest. Because what National proposed at the last election campaign was to leave the top tax rate at 33%, to leave it there. It was about delivering tax cuts to middle New Zealand, the people who needed it. But what the government did is they abolished National's good tax tax proposals and instead spent $2.8 billion on buying some student votes, with tertiary fees being free. And that was going to bring more university students enrolling at our tertiary education, and there's now less enrolled than before the policy change of Labor. So Labor wasted effectively $2.8 billion that if we had managed to secure an election victory, we would have delivered to hard-working New Zealanders, not, as Gareth Hughes says, to wealthy New Zealanders. Their tax rate would not have changed. It would have been delivered to middle New Zealand, and that's what it should have been for. So I want to conclude my comments by saying, reminding people a very good comment that was made by Ian McKelvey, that wonderful colleague of ours on the National side, who said to me just before the dinner break, ideology doesn't work in politics. Ideology doesn't work in politics. So for the Labor government to continue, and I'm pleased that the Honourable Grant Robinson has come to listen to this final point, for Labor to continue to think they can treat the taxpayer as an ATM machine and then spray money around recklessly, as the Honourable Shane Jones is doing day after day. Let me tell the Honourable Grant Robinson, it won't work. New Zealanders are sharper than that. They'll pay their tax legitimately if it's fair, but they will object to being ripped off by a government that imposes higher and higher tax burden on New Zealand taxpayers so that the Honourable Shane Jones can chuck it around the country with a huge amount of largesse. National will oppose this legislation going into the Select Committee. It will work hard to make it better legislation at the Select Committee, but it will certainly be opposing it as it comes back for the second and third reading.
I call Dr. Deborah Russell.
Mr. Speaker, several of the members of the opposition have proposed